Oh man. So I went with Brandon Baker along the offensive line. He seems to be slotting in to be the guy opposite Trevor Goosby. I think Trevor Goosby's probably slotting in at left tackle, meaning Brandon Baker slotting in at right. And honestly, I picked Brandon Baker because I was shocked that Trevor Goosby was the first guy off the bench. That's not a shot at Trevor Goosby. I just remember watching Brandon Baker's tape coming out of high school and it's like, this guy is freaking good. Like he's really, really ready. And so when Trevor Goosby was the first guy to come off the bench when Texas needed it back this last season, I was surprised. And it was a good surprise, right? Because if Trevor Goosby jumped Brandon Baker, who came on campus a pretty already like down the line developmentally, that meant that Trevor Goosby was really stinking good. And turns out he was. And so I think fans this time next year are probably going to be talking about Brandon Baker as a guy who is going to be, or who was a key piece of the offensive line. He is a great, great athlete. He's got a great body. He's going to slot in, I think, really well at that tackle spot. He was a ready-made guy. He was one of those guys that if Texas had to play a young guy along the offensive line, he was one that I think they would have tapped pretty early just based on his intangibles and the things he can do physically, but ultimately they didn't have to, happy about that. And so again, the simple fact that Trevor Goosby jumped Brandon Baker in the depth chart and in the hierarchy tells me that Trevor Goosby is really good because Brandon Baker came on campus already pretty stinking good.
No, 100%. That's a really good point. I think if Trevor Goosby, had only played like a couple snaps and did well, we could probably put him in this category. But I think the expectations for him and how he played last year, I think they're pretty high. But I agree. Yeah. And I think it tells you, like I say about Steve Sarkisian, he always has like 2 to 3 guys every recruiting class that he really wants and really prioritizes. Well, that was Brandon Baker last year, and they got him in the boat. It was known that, hey, I'm going to go to the highest bidder. I prioritize NIL a lot. So guess what? Texas went after him very hard, got him in, and I think he's going to have a really good year. He's going to end up being the right tackle most likely. And I expect a lot from him. Do I think he's going to be, amazing Kelvin Banks right away? No, I don't expect that because like we've talked about, that's very rare for that to happen. Do I think he's going to be a good player? Yeah, I do. I think he's going to be an all-around solid offensive lineman right off the jump, and he's going to have a big test. He's going to play Ohio State week 1, and they're going to have a bunch of pass rushers like they always do, so we'll see how he does in that game. If he does really well in that game, honestly, that could be like the best defensive line he'll go against all year. So that would tell us a lot right away if he does spectacularly in that game.
Absolutely. I mean, Texas is not we're going to know what they are, especially along in the trenches really early along.
No, 100%. So my guy is Devon Campbell. And it's kind of a weird one because I don't think he's shown up to the ability that he can yet. And that's why I put him down here. Like we look at that class. He was the number 1 guy in that class, not along the offensive line in that class, guys. We talk about a guy that I think according to 247, they let out a list earlier in the offseason of best guys at their position over the last decade. He was number 1. He was the number 1 offensive lineman ranked of the past decade up until this class. So I don't know where he's going to rank after this class, but overall, really high ability that he really hasn't played to. And you look at it, Kelvin Banks came in lower than him, off to the NFL, going to be a first-round pick. Cam Williams played 1 freaking year. He's going to be off to the NFL as a top 45 pick. So this is a guy that if he lived up to that ability would have been gone by now. He probably, in his world, plays 3 years, gets drafted as probably a second-round pick because you have to be like an insanely good guard to be a first-round pick, like Quentin Nelson good. Now, do I think he has that ability? Yes. Do I think it's unfair to expect that? Yes, I do. But I think it's fair to expect like a second-round pick after 3 years, and he just hasn't lived up to that. If he would have come out, he would have been like a 4th or 5th-round pick most likely, and that's why he came back. So I think there's that next step for him to take. He's been healthy when he's played. The injuries have not been an issue. It's just been the consistency, and we've seen that. Some games you're like, damn, this guy's really coming on. He's going to be a stud for us. And other games you're like, what happened to him? We've seen him get pulled for Cole Hudson because he hasn't played that well. So to me, I think it's time for him to break out, and I think he's going to break out and be that guy that we expected when he came on campus.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He was a guy who had lofty expectations, and I think he also had the disadvantage of coming in with Kelvin Banks, who came in and was a stud from day one, right? And so you're looking at DJ Campbell and like, why can't you be more like your brother over there, right? And so for a guy like him who came in and he was not just an elite guy, but he kind of manufactured a little bit of drama with his recruitment. He kind of signed, but kind of didn't sign and wanted to have his own signing day and all of that. And so when you come in with that level of fanfare, the expectation is going to be really, really high, and he just hasn't lived up to it. And I think part of it, and I've talked about this before, he was in a very run first run heavy high school system, not a ton of pass block reps as a high school player. And so he was behind the curve in a lot of ways as far as development goes. And Texas has a lot of complexity of what they do along the offensive line. And DJ Campbell's problem has never been run blocking, right? It's always been his eyes, his focus, his feet when he's pass blocking. He's always he's readily looking for work, but not looking in the right places, or his body's not in the right place. He's not turning his body in the right way. He's not. So there has been a level of expectation that he hasn't lived up to. And it's fair, right? He was a top rated guy, getting probably a decent NIL package to come to Texas, as far as the Pancake Factory goes and all that. And so, his ability, there's a lot of high hopes for him, and he hasn't lived up to them. So I would love to see. I was a big DJ Campbell fan, so I really hope he gets to live up to that expectation, because if he does, Texas is going to have a pretty good season.
Yeah, 100%. It will help out the offensive line, because we need someone to step up and be that leader on the offensive line as well, because you don't have that. You had a bunch of guys there last year. You had Kelvin Banks. You had Jake Majors. You had Hayden Connor. Devon Campbell, it's up to you. You are like the eldest statesman in that locker room at that position. So to me, take your game to that next level, and then also take your leadership to another level as well. And I expect him to do that. I think he's a really talented player. Just got to be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think he's got it in him. He's got it in him, but we need to see it.
100%.